Well, good afternoon, and welcome to the first talk of our Winter-Spring 2022 XR Speaker Series. My name is Jeremy Nelson, and I'm the director of our Extended Reality Initiative at the University of Michigan, where our mission is to bring XR technologies for teaching and learning university-wide, both on campus and online. And to support that mission, we want to create awareness and community around XR technologies and potential use cases. So this is the first talk in our Winter-Spring 2022 series. We'll be making an announcement very shortly about our next talk on March 24th. But today we have an exciting talk about the future of content creation and the rise of virtual humans and the Metaverse from Lauren Dyer, the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Dimension Studio. Please be sure to add any comments and questions in the chat throughout the presentation. Submit questions via the Q&A to help guide our discussion. You can upvote those to help prioritize. This session will be recorded and shared later. So look for that if you can't stay for the whole time. All right, so Lauren has joined Dimension after having gained a wealth of experience working within the production and media industries. Whilst working with industry-leading production houses such as The Mill, Media Monks, Stink Studios, and Dentsu Aegis in senior new business roles, Lauren helped execute some of the world's first interactive films, as well as facilitate the rise of social media content, producing tailor-made projects for key platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat. Lauren is a passionate advocate for emerging tech and the metaverse, has become an industry spokesperson and judge on a variety of topics and awards. She has been invited to speak on various panels at festivals across the world, including Advertising Week Europe, GLUG, the Webbies, Google, Digital Shortage, and DNAD. Currently judging for BIMA, the Lovies, Webbies, and the FWA. She is also committed to supporting the drive toward diversity and inclusion. She also champions the work of women in digital and regularly panels and chairs women in advertising and production events. Please join me in welcoming Lauren. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Such a kind introduction, and thank you everyone for joining. It's always a wonderful opportunity to have a chance to speak to people outside of Europe, and I had the pleasure of entertaining Jeremy at our studios just before Christmas to have a discussion about the future of content and where Dimension fits into that cycle. So I hope you find today really interesting. I'm going to share my screen and start presenting, just so we can get going. Hopefully everyone can see my screen okay. So as Jeremy mentioned, my name's Lauren. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships here at Dimension Studios, and we're a new breed of production company. And I suppose over the years, there's been lots of different types of people that have stuck the 2 cents into different areas within digital production. I'm very lucky to work at some of those places that were, I suppose, the founding fathers in a lot of respects for interactive and digital over the last decade and a half of my career. But the reason why Dimension, I suppose, is classified as a new breed is that it's always at its heart been an XR and real-time studio at its heart. And we've been, I suppose, very, very lucky to fall within a few things that people are starting to hear about more and more, specifically within the Metaverse and XR. And that's very much part of our DNA here at Dimension. And what I'm excited to talk to you all today is about the future of content and production as we see it, as we're inspired by it. Virtual production and real-time engines have powered the way to enable companies like ourselves help transform a lot of ways how content is digested and executed. And we feel really, really fortunate to be part of that position. So as I mentioned, we kind of fit into a few buckets of output, but one of the reasons why brands worldwide come to us is probably for our experience within creating virtual humans and virtual worlds. And of course, they have lots of different distribution angles and options and reasoning behind coming to us for those different things. And I think that blend of the physical and digital world has always been a fascination for a lot of people, and also that adoption, which I'll talk about and touch upon a little bit later, the adoption on scale or mass adoption, as we've called it, has been prohibitive for a lot of reasons. And I think we're finally in a position where tech, and also most importantly, people's minds have caught up to what the possibilities are, specifically within broadcast and TV and film, but also within the XR spaces like VR and augmented reality, and as we kind of help people on their metaverse journeys. And we're a bunch of artists and producers that kind of make really beautiful content and creatively help brands and agencies, help drive the way for real-time content through a lot of different areas, which I'm going to speak about today. So Metaverse, we've probably heard that term quite a lot, and people are coining the phrase. We know that the wonderful Mark Zuckerberg over at Meta has changed the name of the company, as I suppose is a testament to their driving force and their excitement behind getting really behind this and making a difference in the social areas, but also in the content areas. And I think 2021. Was memorable for lots of different reasons, not just Mark rebranding Facebook to Meta, but that huge change in that adoption of different technologies. And because of what has happened globally through the pandemic, it's expedited a lot of ways where people didn't think it was possible or financially possible, or even just possible in the realms of creating a more distinct and interesting experience for their audiences. We've had to connect with audiences like we've never had to do before. And the metaverse for us is an umbrella and a tool that's hopefully going to enable a lot of brands to connect with their audiences in different ways, and hopefully utilizing really great use cases for digital humans and creating really great environments for them to live in. It also brings people a lot closer to other people and communities, and we're seeing that with fashion, sport, and even fan-based brands where you want to get closer to the action or closer to the celebrities or your heroes. These types of areas are really helping accelerate that, and it's really exciting to be part of that. So here at Dimension, we create virtual humans, not in the way of kind of Will Smith, iRobot, but if anyone's old enough to get that reference, sometimes I forget my audience, but it's a really exciting time for virtual humans because there's so many different areas that they can live in. And here at Dimension, we create virtual humans in a lot of different ways. We are creating volumetric humans, which is an amazing array of cameras. If people aren't familiar with volumetric, it enables you to get a likeness that is a linear piece of content, almost like green screen, but in a four-dimensional view. So you get that wonderful flow of fabric, facial expression, and you're able to capture likeness in its truest sense, like you would with any other high definition camera. We have an array of 108 different cameras that are set up in our rig, and we have a mobile version and a static version, and we've worked really tirelessly internally with our own teams, but also with Microsoft mixed reality to work out exactly the best way about executing volumetric content. And now the adoption, like I mentioned before, is being picked up a little bit quicker. We're able to see quite a lot of different ways that volumetric has been able to be digested. So on this screen is an example, and I'll break through a couple of these examples a bit later. Fashion like Balenciaga and H&M, which are the two middle columns here on this slide. Balenciaga, they needed to shoot 50 models in the middle of lockdown. So we drove our volumetric truck into Paris, shot the models that then got implied into a game. H&M, which is the piece below, that was another volumetric piece where we had a lot of celebrities and models that wanted to be captured with H&M for a new collection with Simone Rocha, who's a big British designer. And this was translated into a web AR pop-up book. So, from desktop interactive films through into, AR and also VR, we're seeing that, the ability to have volumetric play its part in lots of different areas. Bottom left is an example of putting that into broadcasts and using broadcast cameras to utilize a volumetric capture. We shot Madonna for the Billboard Music Awards, where she wanted to dance with herself. And we were able to put her into that position and create some really wonderful content for the fans, that were sitting at home that couldn't be at the event. So yes, volumetric is a really exciting and fun way of using virtual humans. But as time's moved on, even in such a short space of time in the last 5 years, we're still an incredibly focused studio on volumetric, but we're also creating real-time avatars, using our own system as well as things, for example, like Metahumans, which Epic released later on last year. We're able to then reskin characters. Top left is an example there of not a real human, someone that was created virtually, and we're able to rig them like you would a CGI character. But the likeness and the reality of creating these avatars and these representations of humans are getting so past the uncanny valley, and they can be again, digested in lots of different ways and created in lots of different ways. And we've got our own pipelines that utilize that technology as well. And they can be seen in a lot of real-time environments. And again, have lots of different use cases, whether or not they're downloadable video files that are then used on the web or within a VR space, or whether or not they're running in a real-time engine, for example, Unreal. So there's lots of different applications that we're seeing for virtual humans, and being able to create them again for lots of different areas. We're really seeing that mass adoption at scale. And I suppose this is a collection here of a few things that you all may have seen or may not have had the chance to see, but we're even seeing the rise of virtual influencers, people that don't exist but still have an impact on their viewing audiences. And brands are becoming increasingly excited about creating their own virtual influencers and models, and being able to create virtual catwalks, or being able to create a virtual band where the brands have full ownership on these characters, which is really exciting for them, because they almost get their own not living, breathing brand ambassador, but as close to it as possible. And whether or not that is a 3D avatar, whether or not that is volumetric video, we're really seeing these experiences being brought to life in unique ways. So, I think we're going to see a lot more of the way that people digest virtual humans. And a lot of people ask whether or not we think that's the right way to go. I think there's been lots of conversations about AI and how we feel, comfortably having virtual humans. And I think it's not to end, the real human aspect to any of the productions that we do. It just enhances it. And I think, sometimes, if it's not for the right reason, it shouldn't have a place. We don't do tech for tech's sake. We will often sit with our clients and work out exactly what the best route is, and if the route is even, needed at all. And I think that's the decision that content makers have to be, thinking about over the coming months and years as we move forward in this metaverse space, and also in real life space, because that's just as important. Is how that balance is struck between real humans and virtual humans. But we're certainly really excited to bring those to life. And they've got to live somewhere, right? I think it's a common misconception that you just create a virtual human and they can just live wherever. It's a lot nicer when you're thinking about the world that they live in. And again, not to drum that metaverse line in, but I think brands are thinking about their strategy in the metaverse. They're thinking about how their brand comes across and how people exist and play and again make communities and live online. And as much as virtual environments have been around for decades within gaming, and also for CGI films, you only have to look back in the last 2 decades for things like Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter, where bringing storybooks to life that have been in people's imaginations. Virtual realities still have very much a place, but they're getting more real than ever. But being able to step inside it, whether or not that's in VR or portals in AR, or even making content specifically for YouTube or even content for film, we're seeing, you know, for the first time ever, this blend between, you know, real-time environments that allow you to be creative and open and free, with the blend of real environments. And again, the pandemic allowed us to rethink and have time. I'm not going to sit here and think, you know, talk about the Mandalorian and what Monolith created with Disney, but the Mandalorian expedited lots of conversations, and it was almost like a big proof of concept for a lot of people that have been dabbling in the virtual production arena, and being able to make these types of titles without going on location, without worrying if it's going to rain, without thinking how the cost and the sustainability element of, you know, being able to take a whole crew halfway around the world just to get that one shot. It's not going to take away from filmmaking, but again, it's going to enhance that experience. And I think creatively, you know, on set and post-production, a blending and being able to create environments where virtual humans or real humans can live, that's a really exciting moment. And then you add in, you know, avatars and NFTs and gaming and all those wonderful things that are happening right now. And it's this huge cluster of excitement because the world really is embraced it. You know, we in digital and production have been talking about this for, you know, I said over a decade, about how people perceive digital content. But for the first time, you know, you can create digital content that is actually supporting big feature films or episodical content for the likes of Disney, Netflix, Amazon, you know, the big three, and even Apple. You know, these guys are creating content at a speed of knots, and they need to be able to do this sustainably. They need to be able to do it creatively, and most importantly, they need to push the boundaries on tech, because, you know, it's a great thing to ever be learning in that realm and in that area. And on set and in events and production, you know, these services have existed for a long time, but the you know, the proof of concepts or being on set to be able to change the color of the sky, or to be able to add more people into the background without having to reshoot necessarily, without having to go back on location. We're seeing for the first time, you know, these types of on-set services have a huge part to play in the bigger, wider productions, as well as the traditional digital, you know, VR and XR worlds, which is great to see finally. Again, digital having a really exciting place. And we believe that's kind of for three things, and I've talked and touched upon those here today. You know, one of those is the hardware. You know, we've seen, you know, Oculus, you know, the PlayStation VR 2 has just been announced yesterday. These platforms have evolved from really expensive, bulky, tethered wands, you know, and even phones that wouldn't even allow AR, and having loads of external sensors and all this crazy tech that was really expensive and really hard to get hold of. And unless you knew what you were doing, it was really difficult to program for it. And I think with like a lot of open source technology and things like, you know, Epic with their Unreal engine, they've allowed it to be open to let people experiment, to let people get excited and get tangible and hands-on with the tech. And because that hardware and software has evolved, it's enabled that mass adoption and made it, you know, more affordable and, yeah, you know, really exciting to people that perhaps wanted to get into it but couldn't, and that's a huge priority, I think, for the industry, and even at, you know, production AAA standards across the industry for episodical and feature film level. We're seeing that, you know, even though the hardware is really expensive, the software packages and everything that's coming through, you know, on scale, they're a little bit easier and a little bit more affordable, which means that, you know, lower budget films and lower budget productions are able to happen with the same technologies and not necessarily be on the back foot to the big four production houses out there. And if we kind of jump back into more of the, I suppose, the experience side of things, this is all about how we interact with it, right? I think if we spoke to each other 2.5 years ago, I would have been perhaps, a little bit more downtrodden in regards to the adoption of this technology, because there wasn't enough experiences out there. There was kind of the same stuff. And although we've seen amazing platforms like Instagram and Snap and TikTok allow content to be really accessible, the experiences sometimes may have been a bit clunky, and therefore, that the user interfaces of all these different platforms have made it a little bit easier. And also our own experiences. We want, a great AR experience now because our phone offers it. We want to be able to go and have a VR experience and have it to be tetherless, and, have a free room full and walk around and see things. Our expectations have grown huge, I think, as an audience, even in the last couple of years. And I think that's a natural progression of the tech, but also that adoption. And then finally, for kind of the end user, specifically within brands and production companies, we're seeing a clear return on investment. Now, whether or not that is at top level, not wandering around the world shooting all the time to get those great shots, but creating them here in our studios, or whether or not it's, being able to get people into a concert or at a catwalk show without flying halfway across the world to do so. That accessibility in the markets, as the market's exiting its infancy, specifically within virtual production, and we're seeing that accelerated hugely. We're seeing that the biggest source of revenues for a lot of brands and companies now are from just getting content made out there and making it accessible. And if you can make content more affordable and less prohibitive because of cost, you're already getting your return on investment tenfold. Or being able to repurpose and reuse assets, which is an amazing thing to be able to do with the virtual humans, as an example. If you see them on a billboard, then you might want them, an interactive billboard. You might want them on your website. You might want them in an AR. You might want them in VR, or you might just want to create some beautiful content with them that lives online somewhere. We can have that one size fits all, or rejig content to make it again accessible and to make it a good return on investment, because the world doesn't necessarily have millions and millions and millions to make things not repeatable and therefore not translatable to other markets. So as fast as we can make things more durable and more accessible, I think a lot more people are going to be seeing that return of investment. And probably not many people know this, but projects like Balenciaga that come to our doors kind of tick that box for us, where they can reuse assets. And I think when the fashion world was forced completely online during the pandemic, we saw this next generation of virtual catwalk show become, I suppose, more than just a video camera at the end of a catwalk. And how can people interact with clothes? How can people interact and feel like they're part of something? And this particular project we're really proud of here at Dimension, because we were able to make it happen. It was a project that came to us pre-pandemic, so it was going to happen hopefully regardless of what happened. But when we were flung into lockdown, we were very fortunate that we have our truck that enabled us to go over to Paris and shoot the models, as I mentioned before. And the reason why Balenciaga chose to go down the route of volumetric, and this is a really interesting conversation in regards to production choice, is that they wanted that really hyper-real flow of fabric, the reflections on some of the materials, how the sunglasses sat on the face, and how people interacted through this virtual world. And we are very fortunate that we have a mobile version of our static stage here in London, so we can go anywhere in the world with this truck and shoot content. But getting that authentic look of the garments and being also just to kind of tweak a few things in post. For example, the reflective services were quite a challenge at the time because we hadn't done that. We were able to faithfully recreate and track the smaller things like stiletto heels and the sides of the sunglasses onto the final digital models, which were then pushed into the environments that were built for an online game. And I think having these kind of solutions are wonderful because, again, like going back to what I was saying before, it's accessible. The hardware is really easy to use. It's a good user experience, and people are able to view all of the clothing from lots of different angles. So for them, at the time, the volumetric side was an absolute 3D based experience, which really blazed the trail, and I think caught a lot of people's eye in regards to be able to create things within Unreal Engine and use realistic avatars volumetrically in a way with game tech. And that advancement and that convergence of the technology is a really important part of what we're doing right now. So I think it's really great to showcase projects like this because they're almost like a gold standard. But we're also seeing projects like what we did for H&M, where they're perhaps not as expensive, but they're also super prestigious and also showing another distribution angle to projects. And I think anything that brings for me personally, and also dimension, fashion and art, and iconic figures into the homes of people, I think that's really exciting. And again, to be able to capture those garments in exact movement, and for them to be able to sit in an experience which is so accessible now due to mobiles, which is AR, and that web AR experience, which is again not prohibitive, it's a low barrier to entry, and you're able to get these beautiful pop-up books like this one that we did for H&M. And the reason why I show this as a difference to Balenciaga is that volumetric is obviously one solution, but its output is super vast, and that's a really exciting thing. And even though this didn't necessarily have virtual environments in it, like the Balenciaga piece did, you're still able to get really cute and picture perfect illusion of them being actually in this pop-up book, which is great. And to bring that life to people at home, at the audience, or to press, really creates like these moments of magic. And I think the collections that we showed here in the detail and the authentic movement that we did, we were really able to bring that to life. So I think it's good to remember sometimes that it doesn't have to be the multi-million-pound projects to utilize the technology to make it successful. And the measure of success is obviously always down to the end client. But for us here at Dimension, we measure our success, with the happiness of our clients, but also how we can push the tech in new directions. And Web AR has only really, again, been around for a few years. So being able to use that in a way that makes it accessible to all is really great. And I think the eighth wall pioneering technology from the Web AR experiences is a great use case. And please go online to eighth wall and check them out, because there's some really beautiful executions and examples, not just volumetric, but also green screen use of characters as well. I'm going to quickly show you some pieces in virtual production, because I think it's a good stepping stone away from the volumetric just for a second, even though we can obviously use volumetric in these settings. So what you can see on here on screen at the moment is, real life production, as you would probably see it as a normal green screen studio. But these are actually LED screens, which is, again, new way of showing production skills. I think, again, going back to the Mandalorian example, we've moved away from just the standardized, I say standard, it's industry standard, I suppose, of the Mandalorian, which is absolute gold standard. But where we've seen LED scale productions and on-set art departments have a true identity in place, is being able to again add that value, to be able to be creatively acting in real time is a huge bonus for the cinematographers. It's a great bonus for the director, being able to sit on set. And also, for most importantly, the actors to be able to see what's going on around them for the first time, because up until a few years ago, this is generally shot on green screen. There'll be bubbles all over you, and you jump around. But being able to move the green away and actually, you know, for the actors to be immersed in that location is a huge thing. And I think it's a sight for sore eyes when you first see it in real life, and the whole complexities of being able to create these environments in real time and put them on the screens. We've been testing it out here at Dimension for a couple of years, and we're very fortunate to work with companies like Sky Studios and also big other, you know, feature film and production companies to bring their ideas to life. But also, you know, have that agile and flexible nature to it that enables us to, get excited and get the people really immersed into what's possible at the flick of a button, essentially. My artist would kill me for saying that, but it's obviously a little bit more complicated, but it's definitely much better and a great advantage versus using green screen. Green screen will always have a place in lots of different other productions, but for the large scale and also for the whimsical and the magical worlds, we're seeing this as a huge benefit for a lot of people that it would touch in the general productions, from actors all the way through to the people working behind the scenes. So we're really seeing a huge advantage in virtual production, and hopefully at one point over the course of the sessions over the next few months, I'll hopefully try and drag my head of real time and innovation, Ed Thomas, to come and specifically talk more about this, because this is absolutely his roundhouse and he loves it, and it's a really exciting time working in those worlds. And then you kind of got the other end of it, which is, this is a piece, it's actually a piece that I'm showing here that's not our work, but I think it's really interesting to show it all the same. So obviously during the Super Bowl, lots of content that was created, for various different brands. And Miller Lite decided to create something in Decentraland where people could go at halftime and hang out and create avatars and be in these virtual worlds. And these virtual worlds aren't particularly complex. They're not super, high fidelity like what you've seen previously on the other slides. But the accessibility of this is wonderful, and it's also allowing user-generated content to really join the metaverse. And creating a virtual bar during halftime on the Super Bowl is pretty cool, and it stayed open the whole time, and it really gave guests a chance to really explore Decentraland, which is obviously quite a new area of the metaverse. But enjoying Miller time with friends, and I think again that connectivity and that conscious thought of what else can we do, and not sitting in your comfort zone and thinking, what can we do in this area? And we're even seeing that with Roblox and various other different points of reference. But I think it's important to realize that virtual environments don't actually have to constantly be hyper real. They can also be part of that. So this year, it's, I pose this as a question, but it's also a statement. I think creating content that's going to be more diverse, more accessible, more exciting, and having the metaverse almost like as a centralized point to that, and everything that comes off it. It's a huge opportunity for content makers, at university, outside university, to really grab by both hands and embrace it, because I think none of this would exist if the creative idea wasn't good enough. And we often, when we see projects, we don't put technology first. We go through the idea and the ideation first and work out what technology is best suited for it. And with the expanding metaverse conversations and strategies that are going on for brands and people just clambering for space in this arena, it's really important to think about how the creativity actually disrupts the universe that we're sitting in for content creation. Because for me personally, it's really exciting to see new and innovative things, but at the heart of it, no one's really going to see it, and we're not going to get that mass adoption like we really need it to in those various different areas unless it's a great idea. That's what makes it shareable. That's what makes it live on. That's what makes it have a place, and not just having tech for tech's sake. And I think, we're seeing, lots of different areas. I think, virtual production, I've spoken about, so I don't really need to dwell on that, but it encompasses lots of different things. And that is, real time at its heart. And whilst brands endeavor to be more and more creative, we're seeing that virtual production is unbound by the laws of geography. You don't need to go on location to shoot it. And even physics, you can bring things in and change the color of the sky to purple if you really want to. You don't necessarily need to do that in post. You can do it in real time. And that's all really exciting. And then we're seeing the virtual human element of it, whether or not that's virtual celebrities or virtual supermodels, as it become more believable and more realistic, we're blurring the lines between virtual and physical, as fast as we've ever done before. And this opens up enormous creative potential, as I mentioned, but also the flexibility for brands to create stories and bring these to life in new ways, and also for you to personalize and for you to get on board with that, because I think it's not about being frightened about where we're going with virtual humans. There's always going to be a place for us real physical flesh and bone things, but I think where you can meet up online with friends and where you can experience concerts with friends halfway around the world, or if you want to visit a catwalk show, if you want to go to an art gallery, being able to have a virtual self is just an extension of where we've sat in the last few years with Facebook and our other social media platforms. And then, I haven't really mentioned in real life too much just on today's conversations about content, but as we're, that connection about community and purchase and bricks and mortar, it still has a place to have a hub, to have a place in real life for a mecca for people to go back to. What better way than to create a meaningful ecosystem and experience than for a lot of brands actually to have a physical space, and how those digital connections and those digital content moments can branch off of those in real life moments. I think, again, as humans, over the last couple of years, we've been deprived of contact. Now I'm sitting here in front of a computer. It's quite ironic me talking about contact, but being together and being able to get excited about, what we can do together in real life, but also how that links into our virtual selves and our virtual worlds. There's still amazing ways to do it, and if tech can help be a tool to that and connecting the real and the digital together, I think that's going to be a huge one. Haven't spoken too much about NFTs because I feel like that is a whole separate conversation, but here at Dimension we are working quite hard on that area, because it's only natural that this fits within quite a few areas that I've spoken about today, specifically, obviously, the metaverse. Billions of dollars have been spent on virtual goods over the last couple of years, skins in Fortnite. There's always been a gaming element to being able to dress your own avatar online. I mean, we've been doing that for decades, right? But those collabs that we're seeing at the moment with artifacts, and obviously we're seeing, companies like Nike that have bought artifacts for the likes of having pods and having their own little versions of their metaverse where you can collect your NFT trainers online. It's going to be big business, and you can only imagine dressing your avatar in your virtual world is going to be just as important as how you dress externally. We're seeing digital houses like the Fabricant creating beautiful collections, again thinking about the sustainability element to it. Water is at a premium when making a lot of clothes, especially high-end clothes, and they had an amazing collection with Puma where I think they saved about 25% less water because they created less garments, because they had a very small collection, but then they had their NFTs and their virtual collection where people could go and purchase online. I mean, as we know, Fortnite's completely free to play, but I think last year they probably had around $2 to $3 billion in revenue, thanks to people buying skins. And we saw the Fabricant's iridescent dress sold for about $9,500. So it's a huge money spin for a lot of people. But also, that aside, money aside, creating content for NFTs can be super exciting. You can imagine, holding on to, various different artifacts through culture and through the decades, whether or not they don't just have to be fashion, but they could be moments in time. As a digital entity, we're seeing that now with art and artists getting behind that. But having and owning a piece of digital culture is really, really exciting. And I think that's a great world for us to be in right now. And I think, yeah, maybe we should come back another day and speak about NFTs, just because it's such a wide subject and conversation, and I could sit here all day talking about it. We're speaking to a lot of brands that are excited about connecting virtual worlds, virtual humans, and NFTs. But hopefully, hopefully the most important thing that we see on all of this is, and I think these are, I suppose, the main takeaways today, is that, you know, we're in a new era of content, so make it powerful, make it creative, make it exciting. And that's not just for yourself as content creators or for yourself as a brand, but also for your audiences. We're only going to have an appetite for consuming content at a greater speed and a greater rate. And, you know, the things that get people talking and sharing, and things that stand the test of time, are the things that are culturally relevant, but also they've got a wonderful story at heart. Can't beat a good story, specifically with film and episodical content like we're seeing. Sustainable experiences is a huge thing for Dimension, and working out how we can be more sustainable as an industry. I think for a long time we've been really fortunate in digital to, you know, be at the forefront of that and work that out. But I think, you know, whether or not that is consuming less, you know, fashion goods and purchasing more things that are for your digital self, or being able to reuse and repurpose assets, that's a really exciting area. And I'm only thinking that we're going to see more of that. And I think, you know, moving from, as I mentioned before, that the future of content lies ever more in sustainable products. Consumers are ready for it. Shopify, you know, as an example, reported, I think, double the conversion for purchase when AR is used. And therefore less products, you know, are being sent back, which is obviously less airfare, less postage, less packaging. So, you know, if you can use AR as an extension to that, then isn't that great? And then, like, mass participation, I think VR is specifically, we're going to have a great year for VR this year. We're seeing that with Oculus and hanging out with friends online. So we know that the PlayStation are launching their new VR2. They announced that yesterday. But it's so much more than just a lookbook or a fashion show or being at a concert. You know, it's about creating these not about creating these exclusive experiences, but creating a curated experience, and one that is available to everyone. And how can you make as many people see that content as possible and enjoy it? And I think, we're very lucky that we've worked on projects here at Dimension that are kind of ticking the boxes in those arenas. But there are no limits to creativity. And I think, you know, moving aside, you know, there's still always going to be a place for classic film and like classic technology. But at the moment, you know, real-time technologies are paving the way for where we're going to be. So I hope you guys found that interesting. I think I'm on time, right, Jeremy? But hopefully you found that useful. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to at me at Dimension. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Lauren. That was great. That was a really good kind of overview and in depth, and the experience that you and your team have had is just great. We have a few questions. I'll help moderate here. Before we jump into those, I had one that might be interesting to our students. So as we're trying to build out more opportunities and capacity for students to become creators and learn the skills to participate in this space, what are you hearing from either yourselves or the industry or partners in the types of skills and the types of people that can help shape this? Like, what can students focus on?
Great question. I think it's people with a heart in creative. I think it sounds like such a cop out, but I mean, my own background, I studied motion graphic design, but with the viewpoint that I always wanted to work in a production house of some sort. And that was kind of it, really. And I ended up finding my way into a role that's heavily strategic, where I don't really touch Maya or any After Effects anymore, but understanding the core values of what those platforms are, I think is really useful, and it's a useful tool. And we're finding that with I think moving forward with our team at the moment. We're struggling to find people that aren't necessarily just focused in one thing, because I think for such a long time we've all been told, do this one thing and then you get this one job and you'll be great at it, and you go on from there. But I think it's not as simple as that right now. And I think for a long time you were kind of branded, if you weren't a master of a trade, you were a jack of all trades but master of none, right? That was the classic phrase, specifically here in the UK. But I think it's really not that anymore. And for me, it's three things. First thing is grit outrides any kind of education or any kind of ability to use any software program. If you've got grit, you've got more IQ than what I believe anyway. I feel that if you've got the determination to succeed, and go forward with it, I feel like it's boundless what you can achieve. Two is just have a shop around and think about what's happening at the moment. If we're looking at programs, I would say go after real-time based programs, whether or not that's Unity or whether or not that's Unreal. I think it's going to be really useful if you're thinking about artistry and actually making physical, virtual things. If you are an artist, I feel like that is a really exciting area. And I think that's what's future-proofing a lot of content creators and makers right now. And thirdly, I think it's just, again, it's just experience. The experience doesn't necessarily need to be at a company where you are doing the thing that you want to do, but just being part of the process and understanding the process goes a long way. And whether or not you're running, or whether or not you're, bringing teas, or whether or not you're just in the background helping with, putting up green screen, or helping with props, or helping with whatever, or even like you're the social media manager of somewhere. Getting that breadth of experience and exposure to process enables you to, already go up. You don't necessarily need to jump around jobs and be in lots of things for a production company to, understand that you've got something. But it takes focus and dedication, as with any kind of course or new thing you're picking up. It's like, if you want it enough, you can make it happen. But I think if you are thinking more specifically about skill sets, the real-time element of it is huge, or even just said the understanding of it. And most of this stuff's free now, really accessible to learn online. Lots of great online courses. Epic have a great set of courses that they do online. They're completely free, and even on YouTube and picking stuff up. I mean, you've only got to look at the influencers over the last 10 years. They literally just picked up the camera phones and started shooting content. And that's just as exciting as never going to university and never really studying for anything, but actually going out there and making content and just being present. That's really exciting.
That's great. No, that's good perspective. Well, I want to jump off the comment you just made a minute or so ago. One of the questions is, what should social media managers be learning right now to prepare for virtual reality or extended reality in social media if they have no prior experience?
Brilliant question. It's all going to lend itself to the platforms. The platforms evolve generally, I'd say 6 to 12 months, if not slower than the industry that are making creative content. And I think that's because the infrastructure that lies with these big companies like Facebook, Meta, or even places like TikTok, is that they're rapidly just encouraging content to be created at, again, such a speed, because the consumption of content is at such a speed. So therefore, the skill sets that social media managers are going to need is, again, that understanding and being on the pulse of what's actually happening now. Because no doubt in 6 months' time, I mean, we saw it with volumetric assets. We worked tirelessly at Dimension to get volumetric assets within, because there's such a big file size, to get them downgraded low enough, but needed a good fidelity to be put onto the platforms for the 4 meg that you need to make it work on Snapchat or to make it work on Insta. And I think with the guys worked really hard to make that happen, but again, the platforms were really prohibitive to making stuff. So we have to be really smart and how content's being consumed. for me, I feel like there's a huge future within AR on social platforms. We've already really seen that in the last, let's say, 2 to 3 years with trying on makeup or face stuff within Snapchat and Instagram. But I think it's going to be shareable content that you're going to be sharing on your Metaverse hub. Now, what that Metaverse hub is, and I'm sure Meta are already in the background creating their own. We know Horizon obviously is existing in Oculus as an example, is again looping them through, because I promise you in the next few years people are going to be spending more time in headsets. So what does social look like in the metaverse? That is the conversation that's happening right now. How can you share? How can you be present? How can you get communities involved? And I think for me personally, and I think for the direction of where social media is going, I think it's how are they going to make that gap between, they've done it really well in AR and it's really great with handsets. How can they transfer that then to headsets? And what does Snapchat's metaverse, environment look like? I think that's the really exciting, future of that.
Yeah. I mean, Instagram and Snapchat don't even call it AR, right? They call it filters, but it is underlying. It's all augmented reality. So
all augmented reality. So already, I think if we're going to go maybe for a mix, you potentially look at mixed reality. We already know that Oculus have that ability. We're seeing headsets like HoloLens and Microsoft, and we know that Apple's headsets coming, right? What do the headsets look like? I think for a long time, if I look back to 8 years ago when Google Glass came out and the world wasn't quite ready for Google Glass. If no one understands what Google Glass is, give it a Google, and you'll see what it was like. Early stages AR in a headset, and the world wasn't ready for it. But now we are, and it's kind of like it's taken a long time for, I suppose, culture to catch up to where we were going with tech. And I think headsets have kind of been playing second fiddle, because it's a lot more accessible to pick up your phone and do whatever. But actually, now more people are getting headsets than ever. So sure. I do believe that for me is the next step. When, I don't know, but I do believe that there's definitely a stepping stone in between that. I just don't know what it looks like yet.
I agree completely. Well, I'll combine Rex's two questions. Are companies using NFTs to manage copyright on their volumetric content? Ooh. And do you anticipate a future where we'll have walk-in volumetric studios, much like the photo booth at the malls used to be?
Great questions. Love this. This is great questions, guys. I think the NFTs in regards to copyright on the volumetric, no, we haven't had that yet. There's interesting conversations about avatars. I think aside from volumetric, I think because volumetric is essentially, a one-for-one likeness of you. It's pretty much the same as shooting anything on green screen. So in regards to your image rights and everything behind that, it's standardized. But an avatar into NFT, that's an interesting conversation. We're at the moment, working with brands to envision what it looks like for brands to have branded content as an avatar, and whether or not that would be available as an NFT for people to purchase. And is it recognizable on the blockchain, where you have maybe 600 versions of said character available as an avatar? We've already seen it with a few things online at the moment where you can purchase avatars, but they're generally more characterized or really heavily stylized. Right. But we haven't seen anything yet where that's came specifically under the copyright conversations. But I can only imagine over the coming months, when people start to get a handle on what NFTs actually mean to them, we're going to see a lot more of it. We're going to see it in art for sure. We're going to see it with celebrities, and we're going to see it with clothing. I think those are the three main categories that we're going to see it with. But I'm excited to see what the conversations around NFTs online are going to be with avatars and virtual humans, because that's going to really push and bleed it. We're doing a project at the moment called Metashima, Metashima will be like your virtual robot that follows your virtual self within online, which is really great. You can find it online. We'll be launching those soon. Where the kind of, again, I'm going to make a ridiculous reference that probably maybe half the people in the audience won't understand, but batteries not included is a prime example of like this little floating robot following you around in a virtual space, and you'll be able to own that as an NFT, which is great. So I think, there's definitely going to be more and more conversations about where NFTs are going to be widely used and adopted, why they need to be copyrighted, and why I suppose it's going to be more about the blockchain and where they sit on that. But I'm interested in the volumetric. I never really thought of it before. We haven't had anyone ask about volumetric NFTs yet, but maybe that might something that might come out, but I don't know. And then you had a second question about volumetric in photo booths and more. Yeah. God, wouldn't that be amazing? I think we're at a point at the moment where it's definitely not possible, just because of the again, the ability to set that up freely. But we did see it with creating our mobile version, that it obviously is possible to make it mobile. At the moment, the kind of high definition that we look for as a company, it probably wouldn't scale out to a photo booth style. But what we have seen over the last couple of years, we've seen those red carpet moments, right? Where you've got those lovely photogrammetry moments where you've got maybe like 6 or 7 cameras or GoPros that shoot you in a circle, and you get those lovely living holds, which are wonderful. And I think we're going to definitely see more of those. And we're definitely seeing those at weddings, and we're definitely seeing those at more concerts and things, and creating those shareable moments. To create them volumetrically, though, I think we're just a little bit off that at the moment, just in regards to fitting it into a space that would be on a photo booth scale.
Yeah, so it was pretty intense when I came to do the capture in your studio.
Yeah, it's bigger than like my living room, so it's a bit difficult to make that into a smaller space. But I'm excited about the possibility. Right, I love that idea. I think that's a really cute idea.
Well, we probably have there's one more question, and I know we're right about at time, so if we can answer real quickly, and then we'll sign off. But are you aware of any volumetric video cap in healthcare training applications? I think you were involved in one, right?
We were. We actually did one during the pandemic. So as everyone, I suppose maybe the US audience, if most of these are mostly wonderful people from the US. So during the pandemic, the NHS, our National Health Service here in the UK, we had to bring a lot of people back from kind of out of service, and people from lots of different hospitals that weren't well equipped to understand the virus. In its early stages, we're talking about really early stages of pandemic. So kind of, if we're kind of talking about March, April time, the NHS came to us with a bit of a conundrum, was that how could we train people that are medically already very, very more than capable, help them understand the virus a bit better and how to help patients with it. Because we were so worried, our National Health Service was so worried about the state of play, about not being able to give people the correct care, not being able to incubate people correctly or quickly, and even down to wayfinding around pop-up hospitals that kind of sprung up all around the UK, because we were so worried about the amount of people that we would have to undertake during that terrible time. Then Microsoft and the NHS came to us and said, can you help us do a training exercise volumetrically, so we can send this in AR to people that need to be trained, so that we can show videos, so that we can have this set up in HoloLens. And we developed a thing called HoloPatient, which I'll actually put in the chat right now, because I think it's a lovely project to have a look, because it allowed so many doctors to have this immersive healthcare experience. I'm just popping it into the chat now, guys, so you can see it here. So this was the project, and you can see it in its entirety. But it gives you a good understanding of how volumetric can not necessarily just be for entertainment, but also be for good. And projects for good are always things that we're really excited about here at Dimension. And with our wonderful relationship with the team at Microsoft, we've been a team together for lots of different projects, and we were very grateful for them highlighting this use case for us, because definitely there's a huge need for training and healthcare, and it was a great way of getting it into the hands of the people that needed it the most. So yeah, definitely great use cases for volumetric that falls outside the typical entertainment verticals.
Well, thank you so much, Lauren. This was great. I really appreciate the time and the audience for participating. We'll be sending out a recording shortly, and stay tuned for our next talk in March. So have a good evening.
Take care, everyone. Thank you so much, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.